I am Zuri, 35 years old, and today my family finally crossed a line they can never uncross. Grandma Estelle looked past my shoulder and asked, "Why are you arriving in an Uber? What happened to the custom Porsche SUV we bought you for your birthday?" Before I could even open my mouth to explain the nightmare of my morning, my mother smiled her fake society smile and said her sister needed it more. Zuri just arranges throw pillows anyway. Everyone froze. Then Grandma did something that made the blood drain completely from my parents' faces. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family who underestimated your worth and tried to treat you like a stepping stone. The humid evening air of Atlanta clung to my skin as I stepped out of a standard rideshare vehicle right in front of the most exclusive steakhouse in Buckhead. Valets in crisp white shirts were rushing back and forth, parking gleaming Bentleys, massive Range Rovers, and customized sports cars. It was a typical Friday night for the African-American elite of this city, a world where what you drove, what you wore, and who you knew dictated your entire value as a human being. I smoothed down the fabric of my tailored emerald green silk dress, adjusting my posture and taking a deep breath before walking toward the heavy brass doors of the restaurant. Tonight was supposed to be a milestone celebration for my parents Marcus and Vivian. It was their 40th wedding anniversary, an event my mother had been orchestrating for the past 6 months to ensure every single member of her prestigious social circles, from her sorority sisters to the country club board members, witnessed her perfectly curated life. I have always been the outlier in this carefully maintained family portrait. While my parents groomed my younger sister Chloe to be the ultimate golden child, marrying a self-proclaimed tech entrepreneur named Brad, and securing her spot in high society, they viewed my path with thinly veiled disgust. I did not go to medical school. I did not marry a wealthy lawyer. Instead, I built a luxury real estate staging company. To the outside world, my firm handles the interior design of multi-million-dollar mansions for professional athletes and corporate titans across Georgia. I command 7-figure contracts and employ a massive team of talented designers. But to my mother, I am just a glorified maid who fluffs pillows in empty houses. I have never corrected her. Keeping my wealth a secret was the only way I found peace in a family that viewed money as a weapon. As I approached the entrance, I spotted my grandmother Estelle waiting near the valet stand. At 78 years old, Grandma Estelle is the true matriarch of our family. She is a woman who built her massive fortune from the ground up during a time when Black women were not even allowed in the rooms she eventually ended up owning. She stood tall and elegant, wrapped in a pristine cream-colored knit suit, a string of flawless South Sea pearls resting against her collarbone. She is sharp, highly observant, and possesses a zero-tolerance policy for foolishness. Her face lit up with a warm smile when she saw me. But as I walked closer, her sharp eyes darted past my shoulder, scanning the empty driveway behind me. Her smile slowly faded into a look of deep confusion. "Zuri, my beautiful girl," she said, pulling me into a warm embrace that smelled of expensive jasmine perfume. "But why are you arriving in an Uber? What happened to the custom Porsche SUV? I bought you for your 35th birthday last month." I opened my mouth, the sting of humiliation already rising in my throat. I had spent the entire morning frantically searching for my car, assuming it had been towed from my secure parking garage, only to discover the horrible truth just an hour before this dinner. But before I could form the words to explain the absolute betrayal I had just uncovered, the heavy glass doors of the restaurant swung open. My mother Vivian marched out, flanked by my father Marcus and my sister Chloe. My mother looked like she had just stepped off the cover of a society magazine, dripping in diamonds and wearing a salmon pink gown that perfectly matched her sorority colors. Chloe stood beside her, gently resting a hand on her slightly swollen belly, playing the role of the delicate, expectant mother to perfection. My mother did not even greet me. She stepped right in front of me, flashing a bright, aggressively artificial smile at Grandma Estelle. "Oh, do not worry about the car, Mother Estelle," she said, her voice dripping with that syrupy southern charm she reserved for moments when she was trying to manipulate a situation. Chloe needed it more. We went ahead and transferred the vehicle to her name this morning. I stood completely paralyzed. The sheer audacity of her statement hung heavily in the warm air. Grandma Estelle blinked, her posture stiffening. You did what? My mother let out a light, dismissive laugh, waving her manicured hand in the air as if she were swatting away a pesky fly. Well, you know how it is. Chloe is pregnant now. She is on the alumni board of the sorority, and she is organizing the upcoming charity gala for the Children's Hospital. She simply cannot be seen driving around Buckhead in that old vehicle she had. It is about maintaining the family image. Brad is meeting with investors all week, so Chloe needs a safe, reliable, and prestigious vehicle to handle her duties. My mother then turned her gaze to me, looking me up and down with an expression of profound pity that made my blood boil. Zuri does not need a luxury SUV to go run errands. She just drives around town arranging throw pillows and moving fake plants into empty houses. A regular car or an Uber is perfectly fine for her line of work. Honestly, the Porsche was entirely too flashy for a single woman with no real career prospects. It sends the wrong message. We were actually doing her a favor by taking that financial burden off her hands. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the valets seemed to stop moving, sensing the explosive tension radiating from our circle. My father Marcus stood slightly behind his wife, looking down at his expensive Italian loafers, refusing to make eye contact with me. He had always been a man obsessed with control, and appearances entirely complicit in my mother's toxic favoritism. Chloe just stood there, batting her eyelashes, and offering me a weak, unapologetic smile, looking exactly like the spoiled child who had just snatched a toy from someone else's hands because she knew her parents would defend her. I stood there staring at my younger sister, recalling every single time my parents had forced me to sacrifice my own happiness for hers. I remembered the summer they emptied my college savings account to pay for Chloe's lavish destination wedding, claiming I could easily take out student loans because I was the smart one, while Chloe needed a perfect start to her marriage. I remembered the holidays where my gifts were regifted to her, the moments where my achievements were silenced so she could shine. And now, they had literally stolen a vehicle right out of my private garage by forging my signature. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not give my mother the satisfaction of seeing me break down in public, which is exactly what she wanted. She wanted me to look unstable, angry, and ungrateful in front of the valet stand so she could justify her actions to anyone watching. I just looked at her, letting the absolute silence stretch until her fake smile began to tremble slightly at the corners. I turned my gaze to Grandma Estelle, waiting for her reaction. I expected her to raise her voice. I expected her to scold my parents right there on the sidewalk for their blatant theft and blatant disrespect. But Grandma Estelle was a woman who understood that true power is never loud. True power does not need to shout to be felt. Her face was completely devoid of emotion. It was a mask of pure, terrifying calm. She did not look at my mother. She did not look at my father. She simply reached into her quilted leather handbag and pulled out her smartphone. The screen illuminated her face in the darkening evening light. She dialed a number, brought the phone to her ear, and waited for exactly 3 seconds. "Richard," she said, her voice smooth and chillingly steady, "I need you to execute an immediate freeze on Trust Fund number 4. Yes, completely. Deny all pending transactions, revoke all authorized user privileges, and halt the monthly disbursements effective this exact minute. I will be in your office at 9 tomorrow morning to initiate a full forensic audit of the account. Thank you." She lowered the phone and slipped it back into her handbag with a soft click that sounded louder than a gunshot in the quiet evening air. The color instantly drained from my parents' faces. My father's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a sudden, poorly concealed panic. Trust Fund number 4 was the primary account my parents relied on to fund their extravagant lifestyle. It paid for their luxury vehicles, their country club memberships, and the sprawling mortgage on their Buckhead mansion. My mother's mouth opened and closed silently like a fish pulled out of water. The smug satisfaction that had been resting on her features just moments ago completely vanished, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. Grandma Estelle finally looked directly at my mother, her gaze cutting straight through the layers of makeup and societal pretense. "Shall we go inside for dinner now?" she asked politely. "I suddenly have quite an appetite." The walk through the grand dining room of the steakhouse was a masterclass in high society deception. My mother, Vivian, immediately pasted on a stiff smile, nodding to acquaintances at nearby tables, as if her financial lifeline had not just been severed on the sidewalk outside. My father, Marcus, marched ahead with a rigid posture, his jaw clenched so tightly I could practically hear his teeth grinding over the smooth jazz playing from the overhead speakers. Grandma Estelle glided beside me, her arm linked gracefully through mine, completely unbothered by the sheer panic radiating from my parents. The hostess led us to a private mahogany-paneled room at the back of the restaurant. Heavy velvet curtains were drawn to separate us from the main dining area, providing an illusion of intimacy for a family that was currently fracturing at the seams. We took our seats around the massive circular table. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the pristine white tablecloth, but the atmosphere was absolute ice. Waiters immediately swarmed the room, pouring sparkling water and handing out leather-bound menus, completely oblivious to the silent war taking place. My parents were visibly spiraling. My father kept checking his phone under the table, likely trying to reach his financial advisors, while my mother took a massive gulp of her ice water, her hands trembling slightly. They were terrified of Grandma Estelle, but their pride would never let them admit defeat. That was the moment Brad decided to make his presence known. My white brother-in-law lacked the generational wealth and social grace of the circles my family moved in, but he possessed an endless supply of unearned confidence. He leaned back in his leather chair, stretching his legs out and adjusting the cuffs of a tailored suit my father had undoubtedly paid for. He looked at me with a smirk that made my stomach turn. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a heavy set of keys attached to a distinctive leather fob, and tossed them casually across the table. The keys slid across the smooth white linen and clattered aggressively against the base of my crystal water glass. "Thanks for the ride, sister-in-law," Brad said, his voice loud and dripping with obnoxious entitlement. "I really appreciate you letting us break in that new custom Porsche. The suspension is incredible, by the way. I have to warn you, though, the cream-colored leather interior is a little easy to ruin. I accidentally spilled my iced coffee on the passenger seat this morning on my way to a pitch meeting. But I am sure you do not mind, right? You can just have one of your cleaning people scrub it out. Oh, and since the registration and insurance policy are still tied to your primary address, make sure you do not miss the premium payment this month. Chloe and I have a lot of expenses coming up with the baby, so we would hate for the coverage to lapse while she is driving it." The sheer audacity of his words hung in the air. He was entirely serious. He truly believed he was entitled to a luxury vehicle I had earned with my own blood, sweat, and tears, simply because he married my sister. He thought he could ruin my property and demand I continue paying for his privilege to use it. Chloe sat next to him, looking down at her menu, as if the prices were the most fascinating thing in the world. My parents remained silent, implicitly supporting Brad's blatant disrespect by refusing to correct him. They expected me to lower my head. They expected me to swallow the humiliation for the sake of keeping the peace, just like I had done my entire life. But I did not cry. I did not look away. I reached out, picked up the keys, and dropped them straight into my emerald clutch before snapping it shut. I stared directly into Brad's arrogant eyes, matching his tone with a deadly calm precision. "You spilling coffee on my custom leather and expecting me to clean up your mess is exactly how you operate, Brad. In fact, it is incredibly consistent with your entire relationship with this family." Brad's smirk faltered slightly. He shifted in his chair, trying to maintain his relaxed posture. "I am just saying it was an accident, Zuri. Do not make a big deal out of a little coffee." "I am not making a big deal out of coffee," I replied, leaning forward, resting my arms on the table. "I am just noticing a pattern. It is exactly like the time Mom forced me to sign over my entire college savings fund so Chloe could afford that massive destination wedding at the Ritz-Carlton with you. Do you remember that, Brad?" "I remember it perfectly." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Zuri, keep your voice down. We do not discuss private financial matters in public spaces." I ignored her entirely, keeping my focus locked on Brad, who was now looking decidedly less confident. "You needed a lavish wedding to impress your fake startup investors?" I continued my words, slicing through the heavy silence of the room. "Mom and Dad told me that family requires sacrifice. They told me I was smart enough to figure out student loans, while Chloe needed the right aesthetic start to her marriage to a brilliant entrepreneur. So I gave up $75,000 of my own future. I worked 3 jobs and took night classes while you two sipped champagne on a beach in Maldives on my dime. And now you expect me to subsidize your daily commute. Chloe finally looked up, her lower lip trembling as she immediately deployed her favorite weapon. Zuri, why are you doing this to me? Why are you attacking my husband on Mom and Dad's anniversary? I am pregnant. I cannot handle this kind of hostile energy. You have always been so jealous of me and Brad. We just needed a safe car for your future niece or nephew, and you are turning it into an interrogation. She reached for a linen napkin, dabbing at dry eyes. My mother immediately reached across the table to pat Chloe's hand, glaring at me with raw hatred. See what you have done. You are upsetting your sister. You have absolutely no class, Zuri. Bringing up ancient history just to ruin our evening. We paid you back for that college money by allowing you to live in our basement for a year after graduation. You owe us. I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. Living in a damp, unfinished basement while paying you rent does not equate to $75,000, Mom. And the only thing I am jealous of is the absolute delusion you all live in. The sound of a heavy fist slamming against the solid mahogany table echoed through the private room, rattling the silverware and silencing my mother's defense. My father Marcus was no longer looking at his shoes. His face was a dark, stormy mask of fury. The veins in his neck were visibly pulsing against his stiff white collar. He hated losing control, and right now the control he had wielded over me for 35 years was slipping rapidly through his fingers. That is enough, he commanded, his baritone voice echoing off the paneled walls. I will not sit here and listen to you disrespect your mother, your sister, and your brother-in-law. This family has maintained a pristine reputation in Atlanta for decades, and I will not let your bitter, selfish attitude destroy it. He reached down beside his chair and pulled up a sleek leather briefcase. The metallic snap of the latch's opening sounded like a gavel dropping in a courtroom. He reached inside and pulled out a crisp white legal document, smoothing it out flat on the table right next to my dinner plate. He then retrieved a gold-plated fountain pen and placed it deliberately on top of the paper. I looked down. It was a vehicle title transfer document, completely filled out with my vehicle's identification number, my personal details, and Chloe's name listed as the new registered owner. The entire table held its collective breath. Brad leaned back again, a victorious smirk slowly returning to his face. He clearly believed that the threat of being disinherited was the ultimate trump card. In their world, money was the only language that mattered. They used inheritance as a leash to keep everyone obedient and compliant. Chloe watched me with wide, expectant eyes, waiting for me to pick up the gold pen and surrender, just like I had surrendered my bedroom when she wanted a larger closet, just like I had surrendered my college fund for her wedding. My mother crossed her arms over her chest, looking incredibly satisfied. Marcus is right, Zuri, she added, her voice laced with poison. You have to decide what is more important to you right now. A flashy car that you do not even deserve, or your place in this family. If you walk away from us, you will have nothing. You will be a lonely staging coordinator moving furniture for people who actually have real wealth. Think very carefully before you throw away your future over sheer stubbornness. I looked at the gold pen resting on the white paper. I thought about the millions of dollars currently sitting in my own diversified business accounts. I thought about the commercial properties I owned outright, the massive staging warehouses, the payroll I managed every 2 weeks for 40 employees. They genuinely believed I needed their money. They genuinely believed that the threat of losing a fraction of a mismanaged family trust would force me to my knees. Grandma Estelle sat quietly to my right, slowly sipping her sparkling water. She did not say a word. She did not intervene. She was simply watching the spectacle unfold, her sharp eyes tracking my every movement, waiting to see if I had the backbone to stand up to the tyrants she had unfortunately raised. The air conditioning kicked on, blowing a cool breeze across the back of my neck, but the heat of my anger kept me burning from the inside out. I slowly reached my hand out toward the document. I saw Brad nudge Chloe under the table, a silent celebration of their victory. I saw my father's shoulders relax slightly, assuming he had successfully bullied me into submission once again. But I did not pick up the pen. I placed my index finger on the edge of the transfer paper and slowly slid it back across the smooth white tablecloth, pushing it directly until it hit my father's water glass. My father Marcus slammed his hand violently onto the table, making the heavy silverware jump. He pulled the property transfer document back toward me, pointing a trembling finger at the signature line. You will sign this car over to Chloe to legitimize this transfer and save our family face right now, he demanded, his voice echoing off the walls. You will do it, or I swear to you, Zuri, I will write you out of my will tonight and you will be left with absolutely nothing. I picked up the thick, expensive property transfer paper that my father had just slammed down onto the table. I held it between my fingers, feeling the heavy grain of the cardstock. Everyone in the room stopped breathing. My father Marcus leaned forward, expecting me to reach for the gold-plated fountain pen. He expected me to sign away the luxury vehicle I rightfully owned, just to keep the peace and protect my place in a will that had always been dangled over my head like a dog treat. Instead, I gripped the top edge of the document and ripped it straight down the middle. The sound of tearing paper was incredibly loud in the dead silence of the private dining room. I placed the two torn halves together and ripped them again, letting the 4 pieces fall like useless confetti onto my empty dinner plate. My father stared at the torn paper, his mouth slightly open in complete shock. The dark, angry red color creeping up his neck told me he was entirely unprepared for this level of defiance. Do you honestly think I care about your will? I asked, my voice dangerously calm and steady. You are threatening to cut me out of money. You do not even have Dad. You are threatening me with an inheritance that is nothing more than smoke and mirrors. Do not think I have been completely blind to what is happening behind the scenes. I know exactly why you need me to sign this car over to Chloe officially tonight. My father took a step back, his eyes darting nervously toward Grandma Estelle before locking back onto me. I have no idea what you are talking about, he snapped, but his voice had lost its booming authority. I stood up slowly, resting my hands on the mahogany table. I am talking about the insurance policy on that Porsche, I said. You did not just take the car, Dad. You forged my signature. You took out a premium commercial liability policy listing Brad as the primary beneficiary in the event of a total loss. You are deeply in debt. Your wealth management firm is under investigation by the state board, and you were planning to have Brad stage a massive accident to collect the payout under my name, just to save your own skin. The color drained entirely from Brad's face. The smug, arrogant smirk he had worn since walking into the restaurant vanished in an instant. He looked at my father, panic setting in his eyes. He practically jumped out of his leather chair. You told me it was a standard policy, Brad stammered instantly, throwing his father-in-law under the bus to save himself. You told me she approved it, Marcus. You said it was just a legal loophole for tax purposes. I let out a harsh, dry laugh that cut through the room. Do not play the victim here, Brad. Your fake artificial intelligence startup just got denied a second round of funding last week because the auditors found out you fabricated your user numbers. You needed a quick payout just as badly as my father did to keep up the illusion that you actually work for a living. You were both in on it, and you thought I was just a clueless decorator who would not notice a massive insurance premium being routed to her home address. Chloe let out a dramatic, piercing gasp. She knocked her crystal water glass over, sending ice and water spilling across the pristine white tablecloth. She clutched her stomach, bending forward as if she were in terrible, agonizing pain. Oh my God, she wailed, leaning heavily against Brad, who looked too terrified to even comfort her properly. The stress. She is stressing out the baby. Mom, make her stop right now. My baby is hurting. This toxic environment is going to cause a miscarriage. My mother Vivian rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Chloe. She glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred, her diamond earrings flashing in the chandelier light. Look what you are doing! Vivian screamed, all pretense of southern elegance completely shattered. You are endangering your unborn niece or nephew because you are a bitter, jealous, miserable woman. You are tearing this family apart over a piece of metal. I reached into my emerald silk clutch. I did not pull out a tissue. I did not pull out a handkerchief to wipe away tears. I pulled out an itemized medical invoice. I unfolded the paper slowly and deliberately, making sure the Beverly Hills Surgical Clinic logo was clearly visible at the top of the page. A baby, I asked, tilting my head slightly as I looked at my younger sister. That is absolutely fascinating, Chloe. Because according to this detailed invoice, the only thing currently gestating inside your body is the trauma of a massive liposuction and tummy tuck procedure. Chloe froze. The theatrical wailing stopped instantly. She stood up perfectly straight, dropping her hands from her stomach. I looked down at the paper and read the text out loud, ensuring my voice carried to every corner of the room. premium postpartum contouring, extensive fat removal, and complete abdominal muscle repair. Total cost $38,000. Paid in full on the 14th of this month. I looked up and locked eyes with my mother, whose face had turned the color of chalk. And how exactly was this luxury surgery paid for? I asked. Oh, right. Using the secondary American Express card attached to my corporate business account. The exact same emergency card Mom swore was only to be used for extreme life or death, family emergencies. My mother let go of Chloe, staring at the medical invoice in my hand, as if it were a venomous snake. Chloe's face contorted with panic and rage. You went through my private mail. Chloe shrieked, her fake pregnancy pain entirely forgotten. That is illegal, Zuri. You cannot read my medical records. It is my credit card statement, you absolute fool, I fired back, refusing to back down. The billing statements come directly to my office. You spent $38,000 of my hard-earned money to suck the fat out of your stomach. You padded your expensive designer dress with a silicone belly just to secure sympathy money from Grandma Estelle tonight. And then you had the absolute nerve to steal my luxury vehicle because you needed something big and safe for a baby that does not even exist. The silence that hit the room was suffocating. Grandma Estelle sat perfectly still, watching my mother and sister unravel with a look of cold, calculating disappointment. My mother lunged forward. She closed the distance between us in 2 quick steps, and her hand cracked across my face in a sharp, stinging slap. The sound echoed off the wood-paneled walls like a firecracker. The physical impact jerked my head to the side, and a hot, burning sensation bloomed across my left cheek. You disrespectful, ungrateful wretch, my mother screamed, her chest heaving as she pointed a shaking finger at the door. How dare you speak to your sister that way? How dare you humiliate us in public? Get out of my sight. You are not welcome at this anniversary dinner. You are not welcome in our home ever again. Pack whatever trash you have left at our house and get out of our lives completely. I slowly turned my head back to face her. I reached up and touched my stinging cheek with the tips of my fingers. And then a genuine, radiant smile broke across my face. It was the smile of a woman who had finally been set free from a lifetime of emotional captivity. The slap did not break me. It broke the very last chain they held over my life. I will gladly leave, I said softly, picking up my clutch from the table. But before you walk out into that main dining room to order your expensive steaks and drink champagne to celebrate your beautiful fake family, you might want to log into your banking application, Mom. My mother paused, her hand still raised in the air. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. What did you do? I did exactly what you asked me to do earlier, I said, mimicking her syrupy sweet tone perfectly. I took the financial burden off my hands. I called American Express on the Uber ride over here tonight. I reported the $38,000 surgical charge as direct fraud and initiated a full chargeback. And while I had the fraud department on the line, I went ahead and permanently canceled every single secondary card tied to my name. My father collapsed back into his leather chair, a look of pure defeat washing over his face. Your luxury shopping card, Mom. I continued, checking them off on my fingers. Chloe's endless emergency card and Dad's international travel account. They are all completely dead, burned to the ground. I turned around my silk dress, catching the light as I faced the heavy mahogany doors. Have a wonderful anniversary dinner. I sincerely hope Grandma Estelle is paying because right now, none of you have a single working credit card to your name. The morning sun spilled across the polished concrete floors of my corporate headquarters in Midtown Atlanta, illuminating a space that represented everything my family refused to acknowledge. If there were a camera documenting my life right now, it would execute a slow, deliberate dolly-in shot, creeping closer and closer to my face as the adrenaline of last night's restaurant confrontation faded, leaving behind a cold, calculating clarity. I was sitting at the head of a massive glass conference table, suspended above a 50,000-square-foot climate-controlled warehouse. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, I could look down and see my logistics team loading a fleet of branded box trucks. They were preparing to install custom imported Italian furniture and curated art pieces into an $8 million estate in Sandy Springs. This was my reality. My staging firm did not just arrange throw pillows for open houses. We executed multi-million-dollar transformations for developers, professional athletes, and international investors. My company evaluated market demographics, sourced bespoke furnishings from Europe, and increased property closing values by millions. I had built a highly lucrative empire entirely from scratch without a single dime of Sterling family money. I employed 40 full-time staff members, including interior architects, project managers, and a ruthless financial team. Sitting across from me was David, my chief financial officer. He was reviewing our quarterly revenue projections, tapping his silver pen against a leather folio. We were up 22% from the previous quarter, on track to clear 8 figures in annual gross revenue. I was half listening to his breakdown of our new vendor contracts, my mind still lingering on the look of absolute terror on my mother's face when I canceled her credit cards. I had assumed the worst was over. I had assumed that cutting off their immediate cash flow and walking away from that disastrous anniversary dinner was the final closing chapter of my family trauma. I was wrong. The nightmare had not even fully begun. My private desk phone rang, cutting through the quiet hum of the air conditioning. It was a direct line, very few people had the number. I glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It was the Corporate Fraud and Risk Management Division of First Heritage Bank, the institution that handled my primary business operating accounts. A sudden chill washed over me. I pressed the speaker button. "Zuri Sterling speaking," I said, leaning forward in my ergonomic chair. David stopped tapping his pen and looked up instantly, sensing the shift in the room's energy. "Miss Sterling, this is Robert Hayes, Senior Risk Analyst with First Heritage Corporate Banking." The voice on the other end was tight, rigid, and entirely stripped of the usual pleasantries reserved for high-net-worth clients. "I am calling regarding the commercial bridge loan originated under your primary holding company. We have issued 2 automated warnings regarding the delinquency, but as of this morning, the account is officially 90 days past due. We are moving to initiate asset seizure protocols if the default is not cured by close of business today." I froze. The ambient noise of the warehouse below seemed to completely drop away. David immediately opened his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he accessed our banking portals. "Mr. Hayes, there must be a catastrophic error in your system," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level despite the sudden violent pounding of my heart. "My firm holds 0 debt. We operate strictly on cash reserves and liquid capital. I have never authorized a commercial bridge loan." "There is no error, Miss Sterling," Robert replied, the sound of keystrokes echoing over the speakerphone. "I am looking at the origination file right now. A $500,000 commercial line of credit was drawn against your corporate assets exactly 96 days ago. The funds were fully dispersed within 24 hours of approval. The outstanding balance, including penalty fees and compounding interest, is currently $542,000. $500,000, $500,000. David spun his laptop around to face me. His screen showed a hidden sub-account buried deep within our corporate structure, an account neither of us had opened. The ledger showed a massive influx of cash that was immediately wired out in 3 separate untraceable tranches. "I need you to trace those outbound wire transfers right this second," I demanded, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Where did that $500,000 go?" There was a tense silence on the phone. I could hear Robert breathing heavily. "Miss Sterling, I cannot disclose the routing destination of dispersed funds over the phone without a court order. You will disclose it right now, or my legal team will be inside your lobby in exactly 15 minutes with a federal lawsuit for gross negligence and institutional fraud," I snapped, slamming my hand down on the glass table. "I am the sole owner of this corporation. Trace the wire." I heard a heavy sigh followed by more frantic typing. The funds were routed through a blind LLC holding company. Robert finally conceded, his voice shaking slightly. But the ultimate destination account for all 3 transfers was a corporate entity registered as Sterling Wealth Management Group. My lungs contracted. The air was completely sucked out of the room. Sterling Wealth Management Group, my father's firm. The pieces of the puzzle collided in my mind with terrifying speed. The desperate threats at the restaurant last night. The sudden need to steal my Porsche and commit insurance fraud. My father was not just struggling with a few bad investments. He was facing total financial ruin. His firm was collapsing under the weight of his incompetence and greed. He needed a massive injection of liquid cash to cover his tracks and avoid federal prosecution, So he stole it from the one person he thought he could outsmart. He stole it from the daughter he viewed as nothing more than an obedient stepping stone. But the mechanics of the theft did not make sense. I built this company with paranoid levels of security. My corporate accounts required dual biometric authentication and physical signatures for any credit origination. My father could not just walk into a bank branch and take out a $500,000 loan in my company's name simply because we shared a last name. Someone on the inside had to have bypassed the security protocols. Someone with high-level executive clearance had to have manually overridden the system to approve a fraudulent loan of that magnitude. Mr. Hayes, I said, my voice dropping to an icy, terrifying calm. I want you to look at the approval signature on that origination file. I want you to tell me exactly who manually approved a $500,000 unverified commercial loan without ever sitting in a room with me. There was a long, dreadful pause. I could hear the paper rustling over the speakerphone. The loan was not processed through standard digital underwriting. Miss Sterling Roberts said, his voice barely above a whisper. It was originated and personally approved through an executive manual override. It was pushed through by the Senior Vice President of Regional Operations. Give me the name I demanded, Evelyn Carter, Roberts said. The name hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Aunt Evelyn, my mother's college roommate, her line sister from their beloved sorority, the woman who had attended every single family barbecue, every holiday dinner, and every country club gala my parents ever hosted. She was my mother's absolute best friend in the world, and she was the Senior Vice President of Regional Operations at First Heritage Bank. My mother, Vivian, had not just stood by while my father drained my college fund years ago. She had actively conspired with her best friend to commit federal bank fraud, to save her husband's failing business and protect her lavish lifestyle. They had used my social security number, my corporate tax identification, and my impeccable credit history to secure $500,000, assuming I was too stupid or too distracted by throw pillows to ever notice the discrepancy. I looked at David, who was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. He knew exactly what this meant. This was not just a family dispute anymore. This was a coordinated, multi-layered criminal conspiracy designed to leave me holding the bag for my parents' spectacular failures. They had intended to let the loan default, completely ruining my business and my reputation, while they safely hid behind the walls of their Buckhead mansion. I did not panic. I did not cry. A cold, ruthless energy settled into my bones, replacing every ounce of familial loyalty I had ever possessed. Mr. Hayes, I said, leaning back in my chair and staring out at the beautiful Atlanta skyline. Do not freeze the account. Leave it exactly as it is. I am calling my federal litigation attorney right now, and we are going to let Evelyn Carter and my father explain this $500,000 fraud to the FBI. I bypassed the mahogany reception desk at First Heritage Bank, entirely ignoring the protests of the terrified administrative assistant. The heavy glass door to the senior vice president's suite was locked, but I did not stop walking. I knocked hard twice before pushing my way inside. Evelyn Carter was sitting behind her pristine marble desk, holding a bone china teacup. She was dressed in her signature tailored Chanel suit, her pearls resting perfectly against her collarbone, the picture of Buckhead banking elegance. She looked up, and her carefully practiced smile instantly froze. "Zuri, sweetheart." She began, her voice dropping an octave as she quickly set her teacup down. What a surprise. You should have had your assistant call ahead. I would have cleared my schedule for my favorite niece. I did not sit down. I walked directly to her desk and dropped the printed ledger from my finance team onto her keyboard. Do not call me Sweetheart Evelyn. And do not pretend you do not know exactly why I am standing in your office. I want to know how long it took you to manually override the biometric security protocols on my corporate account. Was it a 5-minute job, or did it take you all afternoon to commit federal wire fraud? Evelyn swallowed hard. The color drained from her perfectly contoured face. She glanced nervously at the frosted glass walls of her office, making sure the blinds were drawn. Zuri, you need to lower your voice. This is a misunderstanding. Your father came to me in absolute desperation. He just needed a temporary bridge loan to cover some liquidity issues at his firm. He swore he would pay it back before the first quarter statement was even generated. He forged my signature. I stated, my voice perfectly level but sharp as a razor, and you knowingly approved it. You bypassed the underwriting department because you knew they would flag it immediately. You leveraged your position at this bank to steal $500,000 from my staging company to bail out your sorority sister's husband. That is not a misunderstanding, Evelyn. That is a Class B felony carrying a 20-year federal prison sentence. Before Evelyn could form another pathetic excuse, the heavy glass door swung open again. My mother Vivian marched into the office. She was wearing a breathless expression and carrying a Hermes Birkin bag like a shield. Evelyn must have texted her the second the front desk warned her I was in the building. My mother did not miss a beat. She immediately stepped between me and Evelyn, throwing her shoulders back and lifting her chin to deploy her absolute best society matron glare. "Have you lost your mind? Zuri?" Vivian demanded, her voice hissing with venom. "Storming into a professional establishment and threatening your Aunt Evelyn. You are acting like a complete unhinged maniac. You should be down on your knees thanking her for stepping in to help this family when you were too selfish to do it yourself." I stared at my mother, completely unbothered by her theatrical outrage. Thanking her, I asked. "You want me to thank a bank executive for helping you and Dad steal $500,000 of my money?" "It is not stealing," Vivian spat, stepping closer to me. "It is called wealth reallocation. Your father built the sterling name in this city. He paid for the food in your mouth and the clothes on your back for 18 years. His firm hit a minor temporary roadblock. We needed liquid capital to satisfy an audit, and you have millions just sitting around in your useless little staging business. You are an ungrateful, selfish daughter who would rather see her own parents go to federal prison than share her unearned wealth." "My wealth is not unearned, Mom," I replied, maintaining dead eye contact. "I built my empire with my own blood, sweat and tears while you were busy hosting country club luncheons. And do not talk to me about family loyalty. I know exactly who you are loyal to. You are perfectly willing to rob your black daughter blind to finance the lavish lifestyle of your fake white startup entrepreneur son-in-law." Vivian gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "How dare you bring Brad into this? Brad is a brilliant visionary. He is building an artificial intelligence company that is going to change the world. He brings class and innovation to this family. You are just jealous because he is 10 times the business owner you will ever be." A visionary, I laughed, a cold, harsh sound that made Evelyn flinch behind her desk. "Brad is a scam artist who married Chloe because he thought he was marrying into endless generational wealth. You protect him at all costs because having a white tech bro son-in-law fits your delusional country club aesthetic. You protect him so much that you completely ignore the racist garbage he posts online." My mother's eyes darted away for a fraction of a second. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Yes, you do," I fired back, stepping into her personal space. "Do not play dumb with me. I sent you the screenshots myself last Thanksgiving. I showed you Brad's anonymous Reddit account where he constantly complained about DEI hires ruining the corporate world. I showed you the Twitter thread where he mocked my business, calling it an urban decoration service that only succeeded because of affirmative action quotas. He sits at your dinner table eating your food while secretly despising everything about our culture and our skin color. And you look the other way. You actively ignore his blatant racism because the proximity to his white privilege makes you feel superior." Vivian's jaw clenched, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the leather of her handbag. Brad's online comments were just taken out of context, she argued, her voice trembling with desperate denial. "It is just aggressive business talk, Zuri. You are too sensitive. He loves this family. He is protecting Chloe and providing for their future. He is the only reason your father's firm even has a chance of survival right now. Brad is managing the bridge loan funds personally to ensure the auditors are satisfied." I stopped. The air in the room suddenly felt very heavy. A cold realization began to creep down my spine. I looked past my mother directly at Evelyn, who was frantically typing on her computer, trying to look busy. "Evelyn," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "pull up the wire transfer ledger. Right now." Evelyn froze. "Zuri, I cannot do that. The funds have already cleared. Pull up the Swift network clearance terminal." "Evelyn," I commanded, slamming my palm against the marble desk. "You approved the wire. You have the administrative clearance to trace the final destination hop. Show me exactly where that $500,000 landed after it left the Blind LLC holding company. Do it, or I am calling the FBI from this very office. Evelyn's hands shook violently as she clicked her mouse. She navigated through the bank's secure mainframe accessing the global wire clearing system. My mother turned around watching the screen with a mixture of annoyance and confusion. Your father's firm received the money, Vivian said, her voice dripping with misplaced confidence. Brad set up the holding company to route the funds securely so the auditors would not flag the sudden influx of cash from a family member. It was a brilliant financial maneuver. Evelyn hit the final key. The screen refreshed, displaying a detailed transaction receipt. Read it out loud, Evelyn, I ordered. Evelyn stared at the monitor. All the color drained from her face, leaving her looking gray and sickly. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Read it, I demanded. The final destination account. Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking. It is an offshore corporate account registered in the Cayman Islands. Vivian frowned, stepping closer to the desk. What does that mean? What offshore account? It is supposed to be the Sterling Wealth Management holding account. That is what Brad told us. I leaned over the desk, staring directly at the highlighted text on the banking monitor. The routing numbers were clear. The beneficiary name was printed in stark black letters. The money never went to Dad's firm, I said slowly, letting the absolute gravity of the situation crush the remaining air out of the room. The $500,000 you stole from me to save your husband did not go to Sterling Wealth Management. It bypassed the firm entirely. I turned to look at my mother, whose face was slowly twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The final clearing account is registered to Bradley Hayes, I said, my voice echoing off the glass wall.